The odds say it'll either be Dallas Turner or Laiatu Latu at 8. Which way will the Falcons go?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew, aka Sirius Black, aka the Jolly Green Giant, aka the iron that sharpens the iron, aka Mr. aka been covering the Falcons for too many years, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast. We thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this pod and makes this podcast your first listen each and every day. All you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today is not a mock draft Monday. We've exhausted all the mock drafts that we can do. Maybe we'll do another one before the week is up, but it is draft week. Got a couple more days. We'll be going through our final preps for this week's draft on Thursday night and really exploring those, first round options. And that will be kind of our overview to kind of kick off this week, talking about what are the Falcons' options at 8. And seems like there are 4 options, right? It's take Dallas Turner, take Laiatu Latu, take Odunze, or trade back, right? That seems to be the 4 most likely outcomes. And if they trade back, obviously that opens up, a lot of opportunities, a lot of different options should they move back in this draft. But currently, as I sit here recording this, if you go over to FanDuel Sportsbook, official proud sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, you will see practically even odds for Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu being the Falcons, or being the 8th overall selection, which is currently the pick held by the Atlanta Falcons. Dallas Turner is plus 250. Laiatu Latu is plus 260. So roughly even odds. Odunze is the 3rd best odds to be the 8th overall selection at plus 650. And then I think Jared Verse and Byron Murphy are plus 1100 and Quinyon Mitchell is plus 1300. So long shots for those latter 3 guys compared to the others. And this is notable because Vegas, as we often like to label them, in this case, we only acknowledge the one proud sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network when we talk about odds and sports books, and that's of course FanDuel. But in previous years, Vegas had done a pretty good job kind of sniffing out the Falcons pick. They got Kyle Pitts as the favorite to be the 4th overall selection in 2021. It was around this time last year that I think the odds really moved heavily in Bijan's direction to begin that last week of the draft, that he would be the pick. I don't recall, I'm not 100% certain, but I don't recall Drake London being the favorite for the 8th overall selection in 2022, because I recall Garrett Wilson being the favorite to be the first wide receiver selected. But I imagine right after Garrett Wilson, Drake London's odds were pretty good to be that 8th overall selection. And, I think it's not to say that, Vegas, as we often call them, has inside knowledge, because these things change. Like a lot of this stuff is dependent on where the money goes, and if a whole bunch of people put money on Laiatu Latu, that's a big reason why his odds have gone up in the last couple of days or whatever. It's not necessarily some type of inside information. It's really based off of where the money goes and how the house always wins. That they want to get equal money on either side of the bet, so that even if they lose, they still find a way to win. But, I think it is interesting looking at these odds to sort of see how the top 10 is going to go. And when you look at the first 7 picks, Caleb Williams obviously is overwhelmingly the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick, to the point that it's not even worth betting on at this point in time. Number 2, Jaden Daniels is minus 150, 2nd overall. Drake May is minus 115 for 3rd overall. And it's notable to me that you can also go over to FanDuel Sportsbook and make sure you use /Locked On and you'll get $150 guaranteed in bonus bets. But if you bet on the top three in exact order, Williams, Daniels, May is minus 125 versus the next best option in Williams, Daniels, and McCarthy is plus 1,200. So clearly, FanDuel at least thinks that there's a high probability that we'll see that 1, 2, 3 order of Williams, Daniels, May. Pick 4, Marvin Harrison is minus 240. Marvin Harrison Jr., I should say. Pick 5, Malik Neighbors, and pick 6 is also Malik Neighbors, the favorite. Pick 5, he's plus 230. Pick 6 is plus 165. So clearly, FanDuel is not 100% sold on what the Chargers are going to do with that fifth pick overall. They seem pretty confident that fourth pick, relatively confident that fourth pick will be Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think a lot of that is owed to the expectation that at least the chalk, as we say it, is pointing to the Chargers moving out, trading back, as opposed to the Cardinals doing so at pick 4. So we'll see on that front. But pick 7, you have Joe Alt minus 240 or minus 140. I'm sorry. And then, of course, Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu. And to me, what's also interesting is Odunze is now the favorite to be the 9th overall selection, with the Bears currently hold at plus 150. But the next best odds is Byron Murphy at plus 750. And we've heard a lot of buzz for Byron Murphy. We've talked about it on the podcast over the last week about the possibility of Byron Murphy being the Falcons pick. And Daniel Jeremiah did a conference call last week and saying, Byron Murphy could sneak into the top 10. And at least FanDuel seems to suggest that it's more likely to be the 9th overall selection, again, plus 750 versus the 8th overall selection, which is plus 1,100. So yeah, that makes a little bit more sense to me, that I could imagine the Bears taking Byron Murphy much more than I think the Falcons could. I think the Byron Murphy talk is an interesting conversation. It's an interesting what if scenario. What if the Falcons value Byron Murphy? Well, how would that look? That sort of thing. But I tend to side with FanDuel in thinking that it's very unlikely to happen at this point. And then to round out the top 10, which you can bet on at FanDuel, Brock Bowers is the favorite at plus 150 to be the 10th overall selection. So, I think it'll be interesting to see if this top 7, top 8 or so goes as chalky as FanDuel seems to think. Obviously, with the exception of the 5th and 6th picks, they seem to think that there's a strong candidate for 5 out of the top 7 picks, and it's picks 5. And I think part due to the trade back, pick 6, they're not 100% sold on who the Giants are going to take between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, but they're leaning Malik Neighbors, and that makes sense based off of Giants' past historic trends where they tend to value speed at that wide receiver position. We'll see what happens with that, but obviously then the Falcons pick is going to be interesting. So we'll see how the draft shakes out. But, with these 4 options available for the Falcons, Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, Rome Odunze, and or trading back, let's make the case for all 4 of these options and why they could make absolute sense for the Atlanta Falcons as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, it is playoff time in the NBA, NHL, and baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. And, of course, FanDuel has the best draft props as well, as we've discussed all week long. These odds are ever changing each and every day. So head on over to FanDuel so you can take advantage of the odds today. Whether you're pro Dallas Turner, anti Laiatu Latu, or vice versa, whatever you want to go, what are you waiting for? Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And guys, we've all been there as both a fan and possibly as a player, right? It's halftime, your scoreboard's not looking great, you're feeling low, not sure if you can pull out the win, and you got to dig deep, lift your head up and say, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. And that's right, we're talking about the Smash mobile hit game, Monopoly Go, and it's going to let you compete with your friends to get the most riches and build your biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. You can charge your other players rent for their iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. So, guys, the Locked On NFL mock draft is available right now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear what all the local experts and who they're picking for their respective teams, including getting insight from the local college football experts, as well as the fantasy football angle. Locked On NFL mock draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, when we talk about these 4 options, Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, trade back, or, Rome Odunze, let's talk trade back because that's the most nebulous one first, right? And it makes sense, especially if you're of the mindset that Dallas Turner, there's not a whole lot of difference between Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu. I know you ask your average Falcon fan, they might be very opinionated about. There's a vast difference between Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu, and one clearly is the correct pick, and one is clearly the wrong pick. You get that sentiment from the fans. But if the Falcons come away from it being like, yeah, we have similar grades on those guys, and if our goal is to take one of those guys, why not move back, a couple of spots, pick up a 3rd round pick, and still get a guy that we think is very similar? And basically the argument, whoever you have second on that ranking, that guy plus a 3rd is worth more than, the first guy that you have on the rankings. And I think getting a 3rd round pick is probably the most realistic trade back. I see a lot of people speculating about, getting more draft capital, and that is possible. Again, I think you would have to go really far back in the 1st round to expect to get, like if you move back with Buffalo at pick 28, maybe you could get a future first, but who knows if Buffalo wants to make that trade up to give up 2 firsts to go get a receiver or something like that. But I think more than likely, if the Falcons do move back, whether it's, a couple of spots so that the Bears could secure Rome Odunze, the Jets to get Rome Odunze, or somebody else wants to come up and get Rome Odunze, you're probably more likely to get sort of a 3rd in that trade back. But, of course, the Falcons' biggest need is that edge rusher, and that's where Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu come in the conversation. And we've talked before. We talked about this last week, that to me, again, if you base it off of, a lot of factors and a lot of variables, I would bet on Dallas Turner being the favorite. But obviously, FanDuel is thinking that there isn't that big a gap, as well as others maybe. But part of the reasons why I think Dallas Turner makes the most sense from my perspective is, you get the scheme fit, where, with Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake, the expectation is that they're going to run a lot of simulated pressures, which, are, for the layman, is when you're sending 4, but you just don't know which 4 rushers that you're going to send. Right. And that's something that the Falcons have done regularly the last couple of years under Ryan Nielsen and Dean Pease. And, the Rams, I think defense, they were like top 3 in simulated pressure last year. So that's probably something that you're going to see a lot of this year, especially given that the Falcons don't necessarily have a quartet right now that you can sit there and say, like, yeah, these guys can just rush 4 and we'll get reliable pressure. We'll see. Yeah, we'd love to see that here in Atlanta. But you look at Dallas Turner's coverage ability. That's going to allow you to do a lot more exotic things with your simulated pressures, right? Because you can drop that guy and send somebody else, like a Caden Ellis or a corner or something like that. But we've talked about the tendencies, right? That when you look at what the Falcons have valued historically under Terry Fontenot with their edge rushers, it's arm length, right? Dallas Turner has that over Laiatu Latu, right? We've also talked about how this team typically doesn't stray that far from consensus, and the consensus draft boards typically have Dallas Turner rated well above Laiatu Latu as a top 10 pick, as well as youth, right? All 3 of the Falcons' 1st round picks were 21 or younger. Dallas Turner just turned 21 in February, so he also has that in his favor. And so, we know the Falcons emphasize makeup. There aren't any indications that Dallas Turner has the wrong type of makeup that would, scare the Falcons away and lead them in a different direction there. And it's worthwhile with Dallas Turner. You're betting on traits, you're betting on upside. And I don't think that's the only thing that Dallas Turner is bringing to the table. I think he, depending on who you ask, right? Like, some people will convince you that he's not a good pass rusher at all. I don't really think that at all, but like, he's going to take some development, right? That's basically what I'll say. Like, I think he has a pretty solid floor, but in order for him to be a high-end pass rusher, like, yeah, it's going to be a considerable amount of development from them. But I don't think that's a problem, right? I think you want to bet on traits when it comes to this specific position. When you look at the top 10 edge rushers in the NFL, according to PFF, by pressure, that's Micah Parsons, Aiden Hutchinson, Nick Bosa, Max Crosby, Josh Allen, Khalil Mack, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Daniil Hunter, and Trey Henderson. Those were the top 10 guys in 2023. And overwhelmingly, those guys have plus traits, right? If you take the average testing of those 10 guys in the 40, it's a 4.6, 440. That's 82nd percentile. Their average 10-yard split is 1.61. That's 73rd percentile. A average three cone was 6.96. That's 88th percentile. Average short shuttle 4.23, 88th percentile. Average vertical jump 36 inches, 79th percentile. Average broad jump was 10.3. That's 85th percentile. So overwhelmingly, these guys on average are going to be high-end athletes that test really well, and that's something that Dallas Turner is potentially bringing to the table. We talk about this. We mentioned this before with Micah Parsons, right? Micah Parsons is a great example of betting on the traits, right? Because Micah Parsons only rushed the quarterback 118 times in 2 years at Penn State. Only 30 of those came rushing from the edge. So you really had no idea that Micah Parsons was going to be this great pass rusher. You were projecting it. Why? Why were you projecting it? Because of the traits, right? And so it's not to say that Dallas Turner is the next Micah Parsons, but like when I see people like saying like, oh, Dallas Turner is bad because all he has is traits, I'm just like, that's not a bad thing. It's having traits. There certain positions, athleticism matters a lot, and edge rusher is one of those positions that it matters probably more than anything else when it comes to who are the most productive players. That's kind of the point I'm trying to bring to the table. And so that to me is a pretty simple case for Dallas Turner. Now, whether he develops into a high-end pass rusher remains to be seen, and that's dependent on a variety of factors like durability, coaching, development, his makeup, all that stuff that are unknowns at this point in time. But in terms of betting on the traits, it makes total sense. But when it comes to Laiatu Latu, like the selling point on Laiatu Latu is not the traits. Like he's a good athlete, but nothing special when it comes to that, right? We talked about that before when it comes to how relative athletic score, or RAS or RAS, whatever you want to call it, is a little misleading when it has like, Laiatu Latu as relatively a 93rd percentile athlete. Like that's not necessarily the case. But the selling point with Latu is, the polish, is the production, right? Like you're not betting on what he's going to be 3 years from now, like you are with Dallas Turner. You're betting on the player that you're going to get right now is going to impact your team right now, right? Now, when you are talking about Latu athletically, when you look at these top 10 edge rushers, he does compare favorably to Nick Bosa. I don't personally think he's Nick Bosa because I thought Bosa had a well-established and really strong power rush game. Like he could go through you. I don't know if Latu has that, but hey, no one's going to complain about a player being like, yeah, he's got like, 4/5 of the potential traits that Nick Bosa has, right? Like, 4 out of the 5 things that we can compare. He has, 4/5 of that. And so it's like, yeah, depending on who you ask, how important is that power element, right? I think it's probably more important than, some people think, but, easily could be wrong. I don't know, right? So we'll see on that. But with Latu, you're getting day one production. If you're betting on any of these guys to come in right away and get 8 or more sacks as a rookie, Laiatu Latu absolutely is by far the best bet to do that. And, that matters because we're talking about this Atlanta Falcons team. They kind of have like a 2 to 3 year window where they can, confidently say like, okay, well, Kirk Cousins and Grady Jarrett and Jake Matthews and David Onyemata and Jesse Bates and, we're going to get the primes of Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson all over the next like 2 years. And then past that, who knows, right? And so if you want to maximize that 2 years, like Laiatu Latu is more likely to maximize those 2 years as opposed to Dallas Turner, where you're really kind of drafting Dallas Turner for what he's going to be 3 or more years down the road in all likelihood. So that to me is a big selling point for Laiatu Latu, and totally would make sense if the Falcons are thinking, maybe more short term when it comes to the draft, in terms of maximizing this window to lean on Laiatu Latu, right? You also have the familiarity with the coaching staff, right? That's another tendency that favors Laiatu Latu when it comes to the Falcons draft picks. They tend to, they have tended to over the last 3 years draft players that have some type of coaching connection with the players, and Laiatu Latu's comes from the fact that he was recruited to go to Washington, where Jimmy Lake, the Falcons' current defensive coordinator, was the defensive coordinator there. And he played 1 season under Jimmy Lake before he had to medically retire and then wound up coming back to playing football with UCLA back in 2022. but that's a coaching connection, and that can be a selling point, right? It was a selling point for Troy Anderson, right? The fact that the Falcons running backs coach, Michael Petrie, coached Troy Anderson as the running backs coach at Montana State, 2 or 3 years prior to that. And so that was a selling point of why the Falcons could take the player that was the quote unquote consensus 7th best linebacker in the draft as the third best, the third linebacker off the board, because of that selling point of, I know this guy, he's got all the makeup. You want this guy, not to mention him having the traits and the plus athleticism. So that may be a selling point that Jimmy Lake's going to be pounding the table for Laiatu Latu as a UW, former UW player, as well as he could potentially do the same thing for Rome Odunze, right? That's a selling point for Rome Odunze. But the main selling point of Rome Odunze is, the impact and production on offense. And we know the potential to take this offense to the next level. And we know that, offense drives team success in the NFL and has consistently done so over the last 10 years. And if you believe that Rome Odunze, has that Devontae Adams-like upside that a lot of people think he does, to be a legit dude and to be a legit, top 5 wide receiver in this league, that's a huge boon to what this offense could potentially do and take this unit over these next 2 to 3 years that you have these guys to another level. So a similar conversation there. So one of the things I've heard from a handful of fans, though, when it comes to taking a wide receiver, whether it's a Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors at 8, is it basically is an indictment of Terry Fontenot's poor drafting prior to, because this is the third receiver that the Falcons would have taken with a top 10 pick in 4 years. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. But first, guys, I want to tell you that spring is here and baseball is back. And of course, make your way down to the ballpark, whether you're looking for Major League Baseball, AAA, whatever, right? And Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It's going to make getting tickets, to your favorite baseball team or least favorite baseball, whatever you're trying to do, easier, right? They got killer last minute deals, all in prices, viewed from your seat. Their lowest price guaranteed. They're taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. And, I love the views from your seat, right? You get that panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And, they also have the all-in prices, means that you're not going to get hit by surprise fees at checkout. And so take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime by downloading the Gametime app, create an account, use a code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the question is, does taking Rome Odunze or another wide receiver at 8, is it an indictment of Terry Fontenot's draft philosophy and his past picks, right? And to me, the answer is no, right? And I had this conversation or this argument, right? With someone in the Locked On Falcons Discord, link in the description below, over the weekend. But it was like the idea of and some of this stems from what we did on the Locked On mock draft, right? The Locked On NFL mock draft, right? Where after I made the pick, and for those of you that missed it, I selected Malik Neighbors. He was the third wide receiver on the board. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a huge fan of Malik Neighbors. So I took him with the 8th overall selection. And a lot of the commentary after that was, does this make players like Kyle Pitts and Drake London more expendable? And this was kind of the core argument that this person was making in terms of taking a wide receiver would, essentially do that. And there's certainly a chance that, that is one of the side effects, I guess you could say, of that happening, right? Of the Falcons taking a wide receiver. But the reality is, I don't think these guys signing second contracts should be used as a predetermining factor over whether or not a person is a good drafter. And that was kind of the argument that the person was making. And one of the things I told this person in this debate was like, if you hit on, if half of your first round picks get a second contract from the team that drafted them, that's usually you're doing a great job, right? You look at Thomas Dimitrov, 14 first round picks during his time in Atlanta. If assuming AJ gets an extension, 7 of those 14 will have gotten second contracts from the Falcons, right? You look at Ozzie Newsome, one of our best GMs ever, his last 12 drafts as the Ravens general manager, only 6 of those first round picks got second contracts. You look at the Chiefs, right, as the template for how to build a successful team, right? Under Andy Reid, at least of the first round picks that are eligible for second contracts. We've got a couple of guys, like George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie that, will be eligible in a couple of years. But of the 5 first round picks that the Chiefs have drafted that have been eligible for a second contract, only 2 of those guys under Andy Reid have gotten second contracts. And even if you look at the second round picks that were the top selections in their respective years when they didn't have a first round pick, only one of those 3 guys got second contracts. So, the hit rate on second, if second contracts are the determining factor for, whether a pick is good or not, like the hit rate on first round picks then is about 50-50 at best. Right. And so if that's the case, with the Falcons potentially having 4 first round picks now, after Thursday night, the odds were always kind of in the favor of only 2 of those guys getting second contracts. And I don't think it's hard to guess which of the 2 that would be the most likely. And it wouldn't be Bijan Robinson. That was a big argument on why he was a bad draft pick, because of, the whole positional value argument is because, he's a running back and he's not going to get a second contract. So why draft him in the first round? Right. And then I think Kyle Pitts would be the second guy that I would say was probably least likely to get a second contract. Right. And we talked about this in January, where certain hires that the Falcons could have made at head coach probably would have killed any chance that Kyle Pitts, would have played in Atlanta beyond 2024. And while I think hiring Raheem Morris and hiring Zach Robinson as the OC didn't kill those chances, but it's not as like they really helped Kyle Pitts' chances of getting a second contract, right? Because we talk about this Sean McVay style offense that we expect Zach Robinson to run. It's really focused on the wide receivers. It's not really run through the tight ends, right? The tight end is primarily a blocker. That's what Tyler Higbee, who's been the tight end in Sean McVay's offense for the last 7-8 years, has been primarily a blocker. Right. And that's not necessarily Kyle Pitts' game. And so if Zach Robinson's going to bring a similar style of offense to Atlanta, then, Kyle Pitts is not necessarily potentially in their long-term plans. So we'll see on that. Now, I'm not trying to sit here and say Kyle Pitts is doomed. There's no chance he's going to get a second contract, but I would say probably at this point in time, it's about 50-50. And a lot depends on how he plays this upcoming season. And I know that's going to be a frequent topic of conversation as we get to the summer. And we start, looking ahead to the season once the roster is a little bit more set in stone, in mid-June and July and whatnot. So we'll see on that. But assuming the Falcons do extend that 5th-year option, which is, the deadline for that is like 12 days away, they'll basically have 2 years to figure out if Kyle Pitts is deserving of a second contract. But I don't look at, the Falcons drafting a wide receiver at 8 as an indictment of Terry Fontenot's past picks, right? It's like, and even if it was, like, who cares, right? It's 2024, it's not 2021. Like, your priority should be drafting the players that are going to help you win more games moving forward than it is, drafting players that are going to make your picks from 3 years ago look less bad, right? One would hope that's what the priority of the general manager is going to be. So I don't look at it from that standpoint of like, it would be an indictment of previous picks, because the truth of the matter is that, the previous picks 50-50, in terms of whether or not guys are going to stick around for more than 4 or 5 years. With, that's basically what I'm trying to sit here and tell you is that every first round pick is a 50-50 proposition at best in terms of if that guy's going to play more than 4 or 5 years for your respective team. Is the point I'm trying to make. That's the best case scenario, 50-50, right? And in reality, if you're the Chiefs, it's like a 30, 40, I can't do math, 40-60, right? 2 out of 5. Yes, that's 40-60, right? I can do math. I can do math. I can't do math. But guys, so like I don't think that should be a deterrent against drafting Rome Odunze, but I could understand the Falcons being like, that's something that we would have done under Arthur Smith, and it's a new era. And as much as Rome Odunze is the consensus top player that could potentially be on the board, or Malik Neighbors, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to be a little bit more needs based. We're going to be a little bit more, whatever. So I can see the Falcons definitely do that, and we'll see what the Falcons do on Thursday. People ask me like, what do you think the Falcons will do? I don't know. And then they ask me like, what do you think the Falcons should do? I'm like, I don't know. My thing is always pre-draft. I'm always like, I want to know a little bit about a lot of players, and so for me, in order to have an informed opinion on what the team should do, like, to me, you can't just watch a handful of games of guys and think like, I have a complete grasp of what this player is and how to stack the board, And so like, that's part of it. Like, so I guess I would probably take Dallas Turner, but like, I don't feel that strongly about it. to the point where I'd be like, this is clearly the right pick. It's like, maybe it's the right pick. But post draft is when we'll do the deep dives on this podcast. At least I will do the deep dives on film over the next 6 to 8 weeks on all the Falcons draft picks. And so that to me is where I'm more focused on having the strong opinions, because you have the information at that point in time, right? So we'll see how it goes, guys. But we'll be back tomorrow with more conversation around some of these top options as well as others here on the podcast. So continue to make us your first listen. Check out the Locked On NFL mock draft, available in the Locked On NFL draft feed on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every